What does she actually feel the moment you walk away? Not the version you've built in your head on the drive home. The real one. Most men assume it works in a straight line. You leave, she notices the quiet, and something in her wakes up. That much can be true, but what she actually feels usually depends on something almost nobody checks before doing it. Two men can leave the same conversation, say close to the same words, and produce two completely different reactions in her. Only one of those reactions is real. The other just confirms what she already suspected about him. And here's the uncomfortable part. You won't know which one you are until it's already happened. Picture the moment right before it. The conversation stalls. Her tone goes flat, or dismissive, or cold in that specific way that makes your chest tighten. Every instinct says stay, explain yourself, fix it, prove you're not going anywhere. This time you don't. You get up. You leave the room, the conversation, maybe the relationship itself, and for a second, you feel something you haven't felt in weeks. That instinct isn't wrong. Distance genuinely does change how people experience you. But leaving isn't the mechanism. What you do in the 10 seconds after is. Here's what almost nobody says out loud. Most men don't actually walk away. They perform it. They leave the room and check her name on their phone 40 minutes later. They go quiet and quietly track whether she's posted anything, replied to anyone, looked fine without them. The body left. The attention stayed exactly where it was. And that's usually something she can sense even from a distance, because uncertainty tends to behave differently depending on whether someone is actually gone or just hiding around the corner, watching to see if you'll come looking. You can tell which one you are by a detail you'd never think to check. Not whether you leave, but what you do in the first hour afterward. Some men use that hour to live, call a friend, go for a drive, get back into their own life. Others spend it rehearsing what they'll say if she texts, timing how long 3 hours of silence should last before it reads as petty instead of composed. If your hour is full of math, the walk away hasn't started. You just left the room to keep having the conversation in your head. That's the condition nobody explains going in. Walking away only works as a signal when it removes you from the loop completely. If you're still watching for a reaction, you haven't left, you've just changed the terms you're asking on. And most people are surprisingly good at sensing when an exit still has a string tied to it, even if they couldn't explain how they know. Which is why the dramatic version, the pointed line, the slammed door, the I'm done text, usually creates less doubt in her, not more. It hands her something to respond to. A performance can be judged, dismissed, laughed off with a friend later. What actually creates uncertainty is the version with no audience, no line, no confirmation, nothing to point at. You just quietly stop being available the way you used to be. That's the version she can't argue with, because there's nothing there to argue against. And this particular trap doesn't care how old you are or how long you've been together. It plays out the same way at 2 months and at 20 years. Which matters. Because most of what follows isn't a single event. It's a pattern that builds over months, and both people are learning from it every round. The first time you pull back and she reaches out, you learn distance gets a response. She learns that pushing you slightly away brings you slightly closer. Neither of you decided this on purpose. It just becomes the shape the relationship takes. Reach, retreat, reach again. And every round makes it feel a little more normal. which means the next retreat has to be a little bigger to get the same result. That's the part that quietly wrecks the whole strategy. Repetition kills the signal. The first time you go quiet, it registers. By the third or fourth time, it's not information anymore. It's background noise she's already priced into knowing you. What she stops expecting is for you to actually be gone. What she starts expecting is for you to come back. Watch what that does to your language, too, not just your timing. The first walk away, you probably said almost nothing because you meant it and didn't need to explain yourself. By the fourth or fifth, you're narrating it. I need space. I can't keep doing this. I'm serious this time. Notice the shift from a man who left to a man who announces leaving. Announcing is a request for a reaction, even when the words sound firm. The version of you that doesn't need her to understand the boundary is usually the version that never had to explain it in the first place. There's a cost underneath all of this that has nothing to do with her. Every time you walk away and quietly come back once she softens, you're not just training her expectations, you're training your own. You start using her cooling off as the measurement for whether you still matter. That should concern you more than anything she's doing. You've handed the verdict on your own value to somebody else's mood and dressed it up as strength because it looked like distance instead of a request. From here, the instinct is to fix it by escalating. Longer silence, colder tone, less explanation, and eventually going cold for good. None of it actually works, and it fails the same way. They don't make her chase harder. They make her stop checking on you at all. Because the patterns become predictable, and predictable behavior is easy to plan a week around. Permanent withdrawal isn't an exception to that. It's the same performance stretched out longer, with a bigger audience waiting for a reaction that may never come. You still haven't left the loop. You've just extended the runtime and called it discipline. If any of this is already sounding familiar, it's worth subscribing to the channel before the next part, because that's where it actually flips. By now, the real question has changed. It's no longer what does she feel when I walk away. It's why do I need her to feel something in the first place? For a lot of men, the honest answer is that the walk away was never really about protecting their dignity. It was a test, a way of asking, are you still interested in me, without risking hearing no out loud. That's a reasonable thing to want to know. It's just not something distance can actually answer for you. The healthier version is smaller than either extreme and a lot less satisfying to imagine, which is probably why almost nobody talks about it. It's not about the relationship or the person. It's about removing the specific behaviors that were keeping you tethered. No checking her activity after you've said you're stepping back. No message sitting in your drafts in case she reaches out first. No treating her reply, whenever it shows up, as proof the walk away worked. If you're still measuring the outcome, you never actually left. You just walked out of the room with a clipboard. This is usually where it gets harder before it gets clearer. Real detachment often feels worse at first, not better, because there's no performance left to give you the payoff you were used to. No exit line to replay. No checking to see if she noticed. Just quiet. And quiet is uncomfortable when you've spent months outsourcing whether you're okay to someone else's reaction. That discomfort isn't proof you're doing it wrong. It's usually proof you finally stopped feeding the loop that was keeping you anxious. This is where the pattern that doesn't care about your age gets sharper teeth. A man in his 50s or 60s walking away after decades with someone isn't managing a few weeks of tension, he's managing the quieter fear that there isn't time left to build something else if this doesn't work out. That fear can make the checking worse, not better, because every hour of silence starts to feel like evidence about how the rest of his life will go, not just how this week will go. Naming that pressure honestly, instead of pretending it isn't there, does more for a man's composure than any amount of forced indifference ever will. And one clean week doesn't undo months of the old pattern, for either of you. Check her activity once, then stop for 6 days, and that's not detachment, that's a slip inside a pattern that's still mostly intact. What actually changes expectations, hers and your own, is consistency stretched out long enough that the old reflex stops being your default response to uncertainty. One boundary is a moment. A boundary that survives repeated contact with discomfort is what actually becomes a different person. Expect resistance, and don't mistake it for proof you got it wrong. Someone used to your predictable return may test whether the new version of you is real. Sometimes, without realizing, that's what they're doing. She might reach out more at first, not less, simply because the old rules stopped applying, and uncertainty pulls people toward whatever just changed. That's not necessarily her missing you the way you'd hope. It's often just her mind trying to resolve a pattern that used to be predictable and suddenly isn't. Don't mistake that early reaction for the final answer either. A woman testing whether your distance is genuine is not the same as a woman who's actually reconsidered how she treats you. Give it real time before reading anything into either direction, warmth or continued silence. The mistake most men make isn't walking away badly. It's ending the walk away 1 week too early, the moment they get a single warm reply, and rushing back in before the new pattern has had any chance to mean something. You were never going to control what she felt when you walked away. What you can control is whether you're still performing for a reaction or actually living without needing one, and that was always the real question, not what she felt. Whether you could leave the room without leaving a string attached to it.